Welcome back to the Smugglers Den, episode 2. That's right, we've been rebranded to be a Star Wars Destiny podcast, and I'm joined this week by Travis. How you doing, Travis?
I'm doing pretty well, Tiny. Good to be back on the show again. It was a lot of fun last week, so I'm glad you decided to invite me back.
Yeah, Travis. For those of you who don't know us, we didn't know each other very well at all. I invited Travis on the show. He was so great. I said, you know what? Let's bring Travis back again. Still waiting for Neil and Ben to pick up the game. Hey, guys, time to pick up the game. Time to pick up the game. But in the meantime, we have our boy Travis here. He's great. So, Travis, we've got some stuff coming up this week. So, what have you been doing in preparation? Have you been playing repeatedly with a starter deck to be able to whoop everybody at your pre-release events? Have you been trying some new builds? Have you been trying some builds that are specifically without legendaries? What have you been up to?
So I have been playing specifically builds I want to strive for when the packs are available to the public. So I've been tinkering with like some of the ends of the spectrum beyond just like do damage and kill the other guy. So I've been tinkering with like Crime Lord and mill decks myself. As far as the starter decks go, I've been teaching a couple of my friends through Tabletop Simulator how to play Destiny, and playing the Kylo deck just to give them that little bit of an advantage. I think actually the decks actually aren't as bad as people seem to say.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what it comes down to is the Ray deck is very imbalanced for two new players who have no idea what's happening, right? They don't even know what cards are good. They just look at it and go, okay, BB-8 costs 1. I see that. That's great. I've got more resources than my opponent. I can ramp up a little faster. The dark side, I feel like, is a lot harder. Like, Mind Probe is really good. TIE Fighter is really good, but they're so expensive, and you probably don't know about overriding upgrades, and so Mind Probe looks like it's 4 costs, when really it should only be 2 if you just upgrade. And I agree. I feel like the villain deck is really strong once it gets rolling.
Yeah, and you have like all these really powerful like control elements to it that can be really good if you can get them early, like Immobilize.
Yes.
Like a turn 1 Immobilize is one of the greatest starts to a game.
Yeah, I feel like Immobilize is the best card in the starter deck, especially since Ray's dice aren't that strong, right? So if out of Ray and Finn you get one like 2 damage side and you just make them re-roll it, they could easily be left with a +1, and then that's the only damage they have for the turn.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's one of the reasons I'm actually kind of considering just picking up 2 of each starter, just so I have like a complete package right out of the gate for specifically blue. Because I think like if you get 2 of each starter, you have like a bunch of Use the Force, 2 of all the like basic control cards for dark side, and 2 of all the cards for light side. So that can be used to splash into other decks in the full game.
Yeah, I've done that as well. I wanted 2 Mind Probes, 2 Force Throws. That's the bottom line. And 2 Fins, whatever. I'm probably not running an Elite Fin deck. But those cards feel like must-haves. The last thing I want to say about the starter decks, especially since people are going to be playing them, if you want to win with just a starter deck, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is mill your opponent. Milling is really easy to do with the starter deck. If you save your close quarters assault until the last play of the game, and you have your Mind Probe, it's very likely that you will mill your opponent at the end of the game.
Yeah, especially as dark side there. Because they're going to be tempted to play their cards to avoid the Mind Probe damage, and if their deck runs out because it's only a 20-card deck, you just win.
Yeah,
right there.
And people don't really grasp that mill is real, because it's not real in any other game I've ever played. And the first couple times I played the starter deck, I was like, wait, so Star Wars Destiny always ends with someone being milled? I'm not sure I like this game. And then as we have bigger decks, and as you just get a little bit smarter about what the starter decks, like you don't necessarily re-roll every single card in your hand every turn because you might mill yourself, it becomes a game where you get milled a lot less.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I'm going to reiterate when I'm playing people on day 1. It's just like, hey, you don't have to re-roll every time. You should think about, like, can this card be useful next turn?
Yeah.
Or, like, am I running out of cards in my deck?
Yeah. So for me this week, I've done something sort of similar to you. You know, I'm really trying to figure out how real mill is in the full 30 card deck, and I'm hoping that it's not as real as it looks. But there's a couple cards that look really strong, so I've been messing around with that, trying to get a build together that I like enough to make a video about. And then I've been working on my Vader Raider deck a little more, since I'm going to make a video about that this week, and just trying to kind of get ready with some decks ready to go day one that I might be able to get a hold of pretty quick.
Yeah, I think there's tons of decks. I think I'm gonna be more open and just see what I open, and then like see how I can fit those into like the decks I've been tinkering with into tabletop sim, and like change as I get new cards, or like find replacements for cards I don't have.
Yep, it's gonna be really interesting moving from having the full complete collection on Tabletop Simulator, which we are basically playing like an LCG, right? You have every card at your disposal whenever you want it, and to suddenly move to a real slap in the face CCG, where you're like, all right, I opened 12 Legendaries, and I have this awesome deck I want to build. Alrighty then, I can build a different deck that looks pretty good, but I can't build the one I've been working on for a month, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to slowly building my collection up to the point where I can I can finally build my, my Han Rey deck again and play that in real life.
I hate doing that though. Like, I've never really played a CCG, to be honest. Like, I've played a little Magic, but we played really limited form. I played the Star Wars CCG, but after it was dead and the cards were ridiculously cheap. So I never really experienced this whole thing of like, I built this amazing deck, and wow, I can't actually make this deck. Oh man, that's a real problem. So we'll see. We'll see how horrible it feels, and you may see me complaining on this podcast at some point about that. I don't know. We'll have to see.
I don't think it'll be too bad, considering a lot of like the framework of a deck will be either like cards that you can find easily that are like just rare from the starter, or like are commons and uncommon events. And so like I think the big thing is just getting like those big characters like Vader, Poe, Han. Getting 2 dice for those to build their deck is almost integral in a way. They can work with 1, but I think they really shine with 2.
Yeah.
That's going to be like the really, now I can do this deck feeling.
Yeah, for sure. And I just got to say, I'm halfway there with Han.
Yeah, I know. I'm jealous.
Halfway there. I was going to pull... Here he is. I found him. Halfway there, people. Physical Han Solo. That's right. I got him. Halfway there. Yeah, and
you got a Han in your hand?
It's going to be so disappointing, though, when I open my 2 boxes and then I don't get another Han. I'm going to be like, no, I was halfway there.
I think there was some discussion on the Facebook group about like it being quote-unquote confirmed that there are 6 legendaries per box. Like it's consistently 6.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that is 100% or not yet, but...
They can usually control that pretty well with the printing process. To have exactly 6 per box. So I think that's the case. Every box that's been opened has had 6, so I'm pretty sure that's what we're looking at.
So you have like decent odds if you're opening 2 boxes to get another Han.
Yeah, decent odds. Somebody posted some boxes they opened, though, on the Discord channel for the Knights of Ren. It was really depressing. It was like, one of several things that you definitely would want 2 of, and then like a black one in a launch bay, and you're like, okay.
I feel like yeah, I feel like that's just going to open up trades. I'm really excited because the area where I live is getting like super pumped for these pre-release events. So I'm hoping
that's good.
I'll have a good opportunity to do some quick trades, and like maybe I can pull together one of these decks quickly at the cost of like delaying another deck I want, but not quite as much.
Yeah, that's another reason to get into Tabletop Simulator before Friday, or swdestiny.db, which lets you build decks, is to have like an idea of when you get to the event, what would you like to trade for? Like, you may not be able to pull it off, but what would be your dream scenario, right? For me, I really want to trade for 2 Vaders and 1 Han, and then I can piece together the rest of the deck from there. But if I could come away with that, I would be like, oh my goodness, I just won the pre-release launch event. I lost every game, but I got those cards. I win.
Yeah, I think for me, the high ticket, my dream scenario is I walk out of there with or after the weekend, because I'm going to several events, with either 2 Han dice or 2 Poe dice, and then something equivalent on the dark side, but the dark side isn't quite as rare for me. I like Vader, but I'm not like super all in on getting the Vader deck. I actually quite like Dooku and Grievous. So I think like either getting like Dooku Grievous going, or the Dooku Jabba deck I've been tinkering with, though that's actually harder because that requires a lot more legendaries. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me that Dooku Dooku Grievous is basically the exact same thing as the Vader Tusken aggro deck, only just cheaper.
Yeah, I think they're very close. I don't know which one would win more consistently against each other,
Yeah,
but
they're trying to do a similar thing.
yeah, I think the Vader version of the deck is a bit more aggressive from the gate, whereas the Dooku one has like it's more well-rounded. You've got like more control elements and survivability,
Yep.
but it's hard to say. They have the same game plan of just hit the ground running and just put your opponent on the back foot the rest of the game.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk with some detail then about the Vader Raider deck, as we've been calling it. I'm going to have a video this week that will go into great detail with how the deck works. But I want to talk about it kind of briefly here as one of those elite aggro decks. Like we said, the Dooku Grievous deck is going to be really aggressive. Jango decks are really aggressive. Han Rey decks can be really aggressive. But I feel like the Vader Raider deck takes aggro and like pushes it to the next level. It's like, you want aggro? I'll show you aggro.
Yeah, there's a lot of damage that can come out of that deck.
Yeah, so let's talk.
Especially
Let's
with
start
the
with just
Lens
Vader. Vader's dice are really good. The one problem with Vader though is he only has 2 damage sides. That to me is like the one thing that holds this deck back from being just the best aggro deck.
Yeah, I think they were really careful with printing damage sides on a lot of dice, so they only really put it on select things like lightsaber, and the only character I think that has 3 damage sides, excluding Poe because he kind of does too, is Grievous. So like they were trying to be really careful so that like you couldn't get too much consistent damage out of a deck, like at least like from the start, and then over time you sort of build it up, even if you are an aggro deck. So I kind of like the fact that Vader doesn't have 3 damage sides because he would just be like the best.
I do too. I like that it's offset by lower health. Like Grievous only has 10, so he's really a little bit fragile, at least compared to Vader, who has 13. There's actually several people, by the way, that have 3 damage sides. There's so many that we can't just run them all down real quick. But most of them aren't like Grievous, where it starts at 2, right? So it's like 2, 3, 3, and it's utterly terrifying. So Vader's die really strong. The cool thing about Vader's die is when you miss, you still get to pull their resources. Or my favorite thing, Travis, is to go like roll Vader. One of them's the 3 melee. One of them is the 2 disrupt, right? And so they freak out and they're like, "Oh my god, I gotta play something I didn't want to play this turn now. So I'm gonna rush out my jetpack right now." Then you whomp them for 3. Then you just re-roll the other die anyway that you were gonna re-roll for damage.
Yeah, I think there's a real strength to rolling disrupt first, because as an aggro deck, you want to activate your really aggressive character like first action. You have to force your opponent to deal with it right away. So if you took the battlefield last turn and your first thing is to roll that character, they won't have any dice. So that removes like force throw, immobilize. He doesn't like you. All these other effects that require you to have dice, and it forces them to really sort of either just say, "Well, you can resolve, I can't do anything," or they have to spend resources and cards to try and stop you right away. And 2 disrupt is especially threatening because you just got 2 fresh resources and you want to spend them. Right. So you basically then are pigeonholed into spending your resources right away, even if your opponent doesn't really want to disrupt you as much.
Yeah, it's so funny because as the Vader player, you're rarely thinking, "Yes, I got disrupt. I am going to slow him down." You're really thinking, "I've got a lot of cards to punch him really hard in the face. I could use some damage." But it messes with them so much because for all they know, you do want to. This is the turn where you decide, "I don't have the cards to punch him hard enough. I want to delay a little bit for the next 2 or 3 turns."
Yeah, and there's some cards we're going to get into in the deck that really just like you can like leave the disrupt on the table until you decide whether you want to use it for disrupt or just immediately switch it to damage and resolve it that way.
Let's move on to the Tusken Raider then. The Tusken Raider, by the way, another card with 3 damage. Travis, I don't know what you were saying with that remark, man. You're just out of nowhere, man.
I usually tend to not think about the 1 damage as much. I should have said 3 good damage sides because I could say good damage 2 or higher.
Yep,
but you're right.
Totally fair.
Upon further review, like Jango has 3, the Tusken Raider has 3. The Stormtrooper has 3.
Yep.
There's a bunch of them with 3
Veers,
sides.
Leia.
Yeah, I should have said like decent damage sides,
Yep.
because one damage is not. It's nice, but it's like not as exciting.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Tusken Raider though, his dice looks kind of bad actually. Like a 1, a 1, a 3 that costs 1, and in this deck you don't really have resources to play with all that much. But what makes him amazing is his effect. After you activate this card, you may discard a card to resolve one of this character's dice immediately. So if you roll that 3 and you want to resolve it right away, that's pretty powerful before your opponent can disrupt it in any way. And Travis, what is the wombo combo that everyone tries to do with the Tusken Raider?
Oh geez, they like to put the holocron on him and get some really badass force power to resolve right away, typically in the Mind Probe.
Yes, Mind Probe on Tusken Raider feels like the most unfair play in the game, because there's nothing you can do about it. It already feels unfair that a Tusken Raider has a Sith holocron, right? Then he resolves that, puts Mind Probe on him. So now it seems pretty darn unfair that you've got this Force-using Tusken Raider who can Mind Probe you. But what's worse is you get the battlefield, you roll the Tusken Raider, the Mind Probe comes up, which is 1/3 of the time. It's not like it's that rare. Discard a card from hand, boom, 5 damage. There's literally nothing they can do about it. They just take 5 damage. That is really brutal. Once it becomes turn 3, turn 4, and that happens, that's a kill. Like, the guy's halfway dead, boom, he dies.
You mean you haven't killed them already by turn 4?
Okay, fair enough. If you haven't yet killed them by turn 4. No, but it's just, it feels wrong. Feels wrong.
It feels dirty.
Yeah, and then the other problem is, if they do that with a Raider, your opponent's looking at the board going, wait. So are you telling me I have to kill the Tusken Raider and leave Vader alone? What? That
exactly
seems
what I feel you have to do,
foolish.
Tiny. That's exactly it. I think when I play against the Vader Raider deck, I kill that Tusken Raider first because it removes the Tusken Raider die, but it removes the potential for things like that to happen.
Yeah, and it's a real problem when it does. I mean, when Raider does crazy things, you're just looking at the board and going, this is dumb. This is just not fair. So, like I mentioned already, a card that really helps this deck is the Sith Holocron. If you don't know that yet, when you roll it special, which is 1/3 of the time, you get to switch this upgrade with a blue ability in your hand. My Vader Raider deck is aggressive. I don't even run Force Throw. I'm really just looking to get out Mind Probes, maybe some Force Chokes for the unblockable damage. I don't have as many abilities, and so Sith Holocron isn't so oppressive as it is in other decks, but still, if you can get 4 free resources by flipping into a 4-cost Mind Probe for free, I mean, it's hard to say no to that, am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. It speeds your deck up in a way that normally would require you to include cards that give you money. Instead, you just include 2 holocrons, and if you see them, then they just accelerate your upgrade game quite a bit. I think it's interesting that you don't run Force Throw in your deck, though, because I figure that the one Force upgrade I would maybe cut if I wanted to be more aggressive would be Immobilize.
That was gone, too.
Oh, boy.
My particular build, I think right now, is at like 1 Immobilize, 2 Force Chokes, 2 Mind Probes.
Yeah, rock on. I still think I have 1 Immobilize as well, but I'm still running Force Throw because generally you're trying to do as much damage as possible, and Destiny is a tempo game, and Force Throw's special is one of the best in the game for that because almost every deck's going to have at least 1 or 2 dice that they're going to try and get on a 2-value thing, and as long as that special is showing, they can't use it. Or if they roll into it naturally, you can just immediately pluck it away and also hit someone for 2.
Yeah, and having said that, I'm thinking to myself, why did I take Force Throw out again? Force Throw seems great. So Force Throw.
I think you can also use it on Launch Bay, can't you? Because that's also kind of funny.
Oh yeah, poor Launch Bay. Yeah, we'll get into that kind of stuff later. But yeah, I think Force Throw probably does go in. My build is still in the works. I'm still trying to work out some kinks with it. Force Throw is expensive unless you can play it with Holocron. The upside isn't quite as high as Mind Probe, where you go like turn 1, roll it, wreck them. Yeah. And this deck is not looking to control. It's looking to just roll. It's looking to just damage. But Force Throw, I think, is still a burn card that can be used as such.
Yeah, I think so. It's also like the one force upgrade I think I have that like I just really want it to be a special every time, and if it's not a
Yeah.
special, I'm like, this card
Right.
sucks.
That's the problem with it. When you have something like Mind Probe, which also has the 3 damage roll, I just like Mind Probe a lot better.
Oh yeah, yeah. For one more, Mind Probe is a significant upgrade, but Force Throw is still, I think,
Right.
like one of the best force powers right now.
So basically, the way I play this deck, I feel it as a burn deck. And what I mean is just as much quick damage as I can. So some other cards that I throw in my version to make it as burny as possible. One of my favorites is Force Strike. Force Strike is so amazing because you roll Vader's die, it's a blank, and for 1, you just get to turn any one of your blue dice to a side showing melee and then resolve it. So it fixes your dice and does not give them a chance to react. So you just roll Vader's blank, next turn pay 1, 3 damage. That's a really strong effect.
Yeah, in an aggro deck where you're just trying to do damage, the only limiter on this card to you is blue dice. And Vader has a handy, really helpful blue dice that you start the game with every time. That does 3 damage. I think it's almost a Vader card only right now, just because it's really hard to get. I think you want to get 3 damage out of it when you use it, and the only other way you're using that is with like lightsabers, and then you have to pay an additional resource. Vader just does it for free.
Yep.
So I think it is a Vader card.
If you're going like 2 Kylo lightsabers, 2 regular lightsabers for whatever reason, I can't imagine what deck that is. But if you are doing that, it becomes viable. But yeah, I agree. I put a regular lightsaber in my build just to have it, so that like I could put it on. It's redeploy first of all. So if they're going after the Tusken, I can put it on the Tusken. There's more blue dice I can flip to 3s, and then it moves over to Vader. But yeah, I agree. I was going to use it in a Dooku deck that was doing a lot of damage, like a Dooku Grievous deck. I was like, pay 1 to do 2 damage? That's just not strong enough.
Yeah, and I think I run not a regular lightsaber. I think I'm running actually Kylo's lightsaber because I think I'm most of the time going to be putting the lightsaber on Vader anyways, and it has 4 damage sides and not 3.
Yeah,
is the big reason. It's just more aggressive.
Yep, I agree. For me, it's too expensive. This deck really struggles with resources because it's all about playing burn effects like Force Strike, and the next card we're about to talk about, No Mercy, which costs 2. So I really struggle finding money to pay for anything that's not a burn effect or a damage mitigation effect. Like I look at a lightsaber, I've never once played it. I always look at it and go, 3? 3? No, that's not happening. I don't have 3. That's crazy town for this deck.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. But it's more or less like, I think like you're just gonna like as you're playing the game, you're gonna pick which upgrades you're playing that game based on like which ones you see first and how you've spent your resources up to this point. And it's just nice to have. I think every time I've gotten it on the board, it's done some real damage for me over the course of the game.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. If you get it out, it's gonna be amazing. Potentially my favorite card in the deck, and this really tweaks my version of Vader Raider, is No Mercy. And the first time I saw No Mercy, I was a little bit underwhelmed by it. They cost 2. You're basically discarding all the blue cards that you have in hand, which, by the way, are your damage mitigation cards usually. And then you're able to increase the damage of one of your dice by that amount, which kind of sounds underwhelming. Like if you're playing a blue-yellow deck, you're paying 2 to maybe discard, to play No Mercy, discard 2 cards, and bump a die by 2. That really doesn't sound that great. So what I've done is I've changed this deck to be almost entirely blue cards. And so it's generally pay 2 to bump a die by 4. And so if you have a 2 Vader die, you make it a 6, that usually kills a character, even through shields.
Yeah, and No Mercy is a finishing card. I believe I mentioned that last time. I think it's a card you only play when it's going to be decisive, when it's going to immediately impact the board, and your opponent goes, well, crad. I really like that character. That changes my entire turn now. Yeah, you discarded your entire hand, but if you remove their character with 2 upgrades, like if you can use that to punch through Han's shields and kill Han, who cares? That's your win condition.
I don't only use it as a finisher. It depends on the deck. Like if it's Han Rey, that's a little different because I know Han is just immediately going to have 3 shields again, and so it's a little dicey with him. Like if I'm playing against a Poe deck or something, If I have a window where the blue cards in my hand are not cards I need this turn or not that great, I'll pitch them all, do 6-7 damage to Poe, and have him set up to kill him next turn.
Oh yeah, that's a very good point. It's also like a good way to just like, I'm gonna probably pitch most of these cards at the end of my turn anyway. I might as well pitch them now for damage.
Yeah, so basically what I'll do is if I have 4 strikes, like I've had these awkward hands where it's like 2 4 strikes and a no mercy. Generally what I do is I say, well, no mercy is getting played later because I'm not tossing something as good as 4 strike to no mercy. And so I kind of craft and shape my hand a little bit. Sometimes it'll take me 2 to 3 turns to play that no mercy before I find the opportune moment. So it's not just about doing the damage or killing a guy, but it's also about understanding how much burn you have in your deck and how relevant it is in this matchup and how much burn are you going to need in this matchup, and really making sure you're not tossing burn to do one burn effect. You need to make sure you get all the burn cards off.
Yeah.
The last burn card that I have in my deck is Backup Muscle. This card really makes this deck work. Like, this was the card that made me go, okay, I can redesign the whole deck now and make it a 4 strike, no mercy, Backup Muscle, force choke deck, and just make it all about the burn effect. Being able to do 3 damage over 3 turns doesn't sound that great, but when you have 2 of them in your deck, it's 6 damage over 3 turns, and it ignores shields, Travis!
Yes, I know. It's so important, especially because we're seeing a lot of these hero decks that use a lot more shielding effects like Defensive Stance or Han or Qui-Gon. It just helps you finish off a character who's low, as well as get you some really good damage per resource value.
Yeah, and that ignores shields is so scary. Like, there's so many games where Han will get pretty low, like maybe 7, right? And then he's got 3 shields on him. And you're looking at that and you're like, God, that's so annoying. I'm going to really have to do 6 damage now to kill Han. And if I only do 4, he's just going to shield back up. Cards like this are just terrible for that Han deck because you just don't do any more damage to Han. You just go, okay, I got my Backup Muscle. Worst case, 3 turns Han's dead. If I roll a Force Choke or if I get another Backup Muscle, he may be dead in 1 turn.
Yeah. The unpreventable damage is big. The lightsaber also pierces shields as well, so this gives your deck a ton of ways to get through those shields.
And that's why I also have the 1 lightsaber. It's not just the damage. It's I want to not only have burn effects, but I wanted to have enough burn effects that ignored shields that I could eventually just get characters low enough. If they shield up, I just ignore them, move on, burn the other guy, knowing I only have so much burn in the deck, right? If the game goes 10 turns, yeah, I can just keep rolling Vader's dice all day, but I don't think I win in that scenario. I think this deck is specifically built to win fairly quickly, know how much burn is in the deck, and pump it all out in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a good way to play it as the aggressive deck.
All right, well, that's basically what I have to say about the Vader Raider deck. There's a lot of other cards where I feel like there's a ton of room for choices because it's really just about the 4 to 5 burn cards, and then everything else is, what does the meta look like? I personally like to run Lightsaber Deflection because there's a lot of great range characters that are scary, like Han, as we were just talking about. I think that's a great card. I like to run, I think it's called Oblivion, where you take away one of their character dice. Are there any cards that you specifically think are great in this?
The card you were thinking of is Isolation, and I love Isolation. Isolation is a fantastic way to remove like key character dice like Poe, or if you're playing against the mill deck, you can get rid of like Padme or Akbar's discard die when he rolls it, and deny them that what they want to do. There's also, let me pull up my list.
Shields. I like shields. Yep. Hunker Down's really good.
Mm-hmm. You got Hunker Down and Hidden in Shadow, both of which can get you a ton of shields very quickly, and that's very rare on the villain side of things. I think those was actually the only 2 cards that give shields outside of dice. Yep. I also run On the Hunt in my deck as further shield hate and die control. It also benefits Vader and the Raider quite a bit because sometimes your Raider will just roll with a 1 range damage, and On the Hunt can help supplement that as well.
That is one of the things I like so much about the design of No Mercy, is that if you really want to play a hardcore burn No Mercy deck, it really prevents you from playing some great cards. If you play On the Hunt, if you play He Doesn't Like You, which says remove one of your dice to remove one of your opponent's dice, you're adding in more and more and more chances for No Mercy to not do as much damage. And so it's a real give and take. How many yellow cards are you willing to run?
Yeah, I think when you told me about your deck, I drafted up my own version using like those same principles. I think the only yellow cards I'm running are like Backup Muscle, a single On the Hunt, 2 Hunker Downs, and a single Disarm.
Yeah, I think I'm down to 3 yellows. I think it's 2 copies of Backup Muscle, 1 Hunker Down, which to me is crazy. Like, I doubt that's going to be the final list, but I'm really trying to maximize No Mercy and make sure that every single time it's either 6 or it's 7. I even had, I think it's called the Emperor's Throne or something like that, where you get your max hand size is 1. I was playing that for a little while.
Yeah, the Emperor's
just
favorite.
to make No Mercy better, but it doesn't do enough in the deck. It's like, okay, it works with No Mercy. It costs me resources, which I just said I don't have. So I don't know. I think I ended up cutting it.
Yeah, I think that's good as well. And on the same note as well, you might be thinking with a No Mercy deck, you might want to run Boundless Ambition as well to refill your hand. Yeah. I do not think that this deck needs it. I think that fits better in a more controlling, like where you use No Mercy as a finisher or as a win condition, rather than this deck where resources are tight.
Yeah, I don't like Boundless Ambition in this particular deck. Like I said, when I have a handful of stuff I want to use, I'm not going to be able to play that stuff, then have 2 more for No Mercy. That's just not how this particular deck is constructed. I think Boundless Ambition fits in a different deck.
Yeah, entirely.
All right, well, that's the Vader Raider deck. It's really cheap, other than Darth Vader. So if you can crack 2 Vaders, bam, your deck's built for you. If you can't crack 2 Vaders, I'm sorry. I'm sure I'll be in the same boat. I am very bad at opening packs. Luckily, my daughter is very good at it, so I'm hoping that when we open them together, we can offset each other.
Yeah, for sure. I really looking forward to seeing what I crack on day 1 and seeing what I can build with it.
It's going to be very exciting. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about today is a really important topic, and that's playing against an opponent. So what's going to happen a lot, especially when you're newer to the game, you're going to be really overwhelmed by all these different dice that are showing, all these different cards in your hand, all the cards in your deck, and trying to really plan out your turn accordingly, make a strategy. But what I consider to be possibly even more important than that is really understanding your opponent's deck, your opponent's hand, what your opponent's options are, what based on the moves they've made are they likely to do, what information does that give you about cards your opponent might have, and how is that going to affect your gameplay. So Travis, what I'd like to do is pretend we're playing the Vader Raider deck and we're playing against a Han Rey deck, and let's talk about what do we fear from their deck, how might we play our deck a little bit different, knowing what our opponent's possibilities are.
For sure. Where would you like to start off with that?
All right, the place I want to start is the battlefield. So we win initiative. Our opponent shows Starship Graveyard, and we have whatever battlefield we want. I seriously can't find something that I love with Vader Raider, so if you have one, let me know. What are you thinking? When you see Starship Graveyard in a Han Rey deck, how are you reacting to this battlefield? Is this an innocuous battlefield, or is this a scary battlefield?
You should definitely, whenever you see Starship Graveyard and Rey, you should definitely be a little bit wary about giving them that battlefield. Because Rey can recur ambush attachments with that battlefield, and you can expect ambush attachments in the Han Rey deck to get a bunch of extra actions and create turns where she can roll, or that player can roll their dice and resolve them without you being able to do anything about it. So you could think about Starship Battlefield as, if my opponent takes this battlefield, they draw and play a tactical mastery on their first turn every turn.
Yeah.
So you should definitely be wary.
And it's interesting because when I see this as a lot of decks, it's different. But with the Vader Raider deck, if you're trying to win fairly quickly, it can be really tempting to say something like, I mean, I'm going to kill him pretty fast anyway. Worst case scenario, they're going to get 4 recursions of a specific card, we'll say a holdout blaster, and get to go first on those turns. But I'm still doing enough damage where hopefully I'm killing one of the characters soon enough that it's not going to be all that relevant. And I know I've had that thought process before. Is there anything specific that worries you beyond that reasoning?
I think the shields matter less if you're like an aggro deck. Doing 2 extra damage isn't that big a deal in most cases, especially if you're up against a deck that's likely going to not generate shields. As for like your own battlefield as well, I think Vader Raider doesn't really it works really well with multiple battlefields. Some people like the Rebel War Room to just resolve dice. That's really good because it can help save you some money. Like say your Tusken Raider rolls the 3 damage, you can just hold on to it. Your opponent will think, oh, he's got no money, he can't use that, and then you just take that War Room and resolve that 3 damage that way. I am also really a fan of Frozen Waste because not only is it like not super bad if your opponent takes it early, but your opponent likely won't be going much faster than you because you're going to be just like rolling your characters, doing damage, and ending your turn, and playing
and
like a couple supplemental
Frozen Waste again to help people out?
Frozen Waste is the claim effect to remove a die, a character die specifically.
Yeah.
And it allows you to just sort of keep a tempo hold on the game. So if you finish your turn quickly and your opponent is like not really caught up and you know they still have a few actions they want to take, you can like pass one turn and then the next turn take the Frozen Waste and deny them a character die so that they are falling further behind you in terms of that damage potential.
Yeah. I would say for me, one of the absolute scariest things about Starship Graveyard is a particular card, actually. And that's the DL44 Blaster. Those two, when combined, can be absolutely terrifying because the DL44 Blaster has ambush. So you're giving another point that we didn't talk about is every time you let them recur one of these ambush weapons, that's 1 more damage you have to burn through on Han, and you're a burn deck. You don't want to do that. That's dangerous. But after you play the DL44 Heavy Blaster, it says after you play this upgrade, force an opponent to choose and remove one of their dice. So you are giving your opponent a shield, more damage to burn through, and losing one of your absolutely important dice. And remember I said you're not going to be playing a ton of upgrades in this deck. You're looking to do events that are boosting your dice, and you have a couple upgrades. So if you roll Vader naked, and they're looping the DL44 Heavy Blaster, that's only 1 Vader die a turn, and so it really controls the order in which you can activate your characters. This weapon is really terrifying, and you do not want to let them loop it.
Yeah. The DL44 is a monstrous card. It's actually the card I think that really pulled the Han deck together. And if you are playing this aggressive style where you roll Vader first, and you only have like 2 Vader dice and then like a lightsaber die or 1 force upgrade, and you got to choose 1 to remove, it really hurts your tempo plan. Yeah. In addition to the DL44 as well, another scary one that a lot of Han Ray decks are going to have at least 1 copy of is Second Chance. And that can really force you to burn through tons of extra health if they can start recurring Second Chance every turn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's another one to consider.
I had a game where I got to recur it 3 times. It was insane.
Yeah. I mean, like that suddenly every single time they get that card back, you have to go through 5 more health.
So to loop back then, it's really interesting to me that that initial moment of the game, that's kind of a throwaway. You're like, okay, that battlefield isn't that scary, right? It's not something like Resolve the Special or something with Poe where it's like 5 damage a turn. It's just they get a card back. It ends up being so big. Like we said, it's just more damage you have to do, more ambush you have to go through. The DL44 removing stuff. Second Chance is way more damage. This battlefield is actually terrifying. Do not let the Han Ray deck have this battlefield if you're the Vader Raider aggro deck.
Absolutely. And because recurrence is such a rare, I think it's actually not going to really be a thing outside of this battlefield. When you see this battlefield across the table, you've got to assume your opponent is pulling high synergy with it.
Yeah.
There's going to be something that they're going to want to recur every single turn if they can.
Exactly. So I think one of the other really big things with Han Ray, and this is Ray's ability. After you play an upgrade on the character, you may take 1 additional action. As we talked about, there's the DL44 weapon, and there's also the holdout blaster. which is just a 2-cost weapon that basically has ambush and redeploy, by the way, which is great. And the point is, and we've talked about this before, is you play it on Rey, now you get 2 actions. So when you're the Vader Raider deck, it's the situation where you're like, okay, it's my action, it's their action. You have to know that they can always violate that rule. They have 4 cards in their deck that violate the rules, and you have to have that in your mind always. I may not get the next action. Yes, I could put shields on Vader, but he should be safe because, maybe he has 5 health remaining. You need to know you might not get an action.
Yeah, and you have to kind of even like take that to the extreme in a sense, because they could theoretically get. I like to think, what if they had 3 actions next turn?
Yeah.
Not counting the upgrade.
Yep.
Like, what if they did a DL44 into a DL44, replacing the first one?
Yep.
And they got 3 actions, activated both Rey and Han. How much damage could they do?
Yeah.
And so I like to mentally tally up, like, if they got a God roll, can I deal with that? Or like, what's like the expected result of their roll if they do this extra action shenanigans, if they roll just Han? And then sort of like prepare yourself to be potentially in that situation at all times.
Yeah, I think that's probably the hardest part of the Han Rey deck, and it goes beyond that. It's not just how much damage, but how many shields can Han get? Right? He has no shields right now. He has 5 damage left. Okay, I'm fine. Worst case, he picks up 1 shield. I'm fine. No, he could very easily go, holdout blaster into a different ambush card, into another ambush event, and just boom, he's got 3 shields now. And you're like, oh, you're kidding me. Like, I could have just played No Mercy last time and killed him, but I decided to resolve this other die to do this other trick first to set up for it.
Yeah, you have to really think about a Han deck in general, not even just Han Rey, but Han decks in general, as if like about half the cards in his deck also have a duct taped version of Take Cover on the back of them. So you have to like look at your opponent's hand and say like, oh, well, he's going to gain like probably 2 shields a turn.
Yeah, exactly. So it's annoying, it's frustrating, but it's something you really have to be careful of. Another card you have to be really careful of is Negotiate. Negotiate is very easy to play around, but if you don't play around it, it can be one of the most gut-wrenching effects ever. If you do something like, okay, I'm going to play an upgrade on Vader. They roll out Rey. And then you roll Vader. And you're like, yes! Boom! Double, triple melee! This is over. And they just go, oh, negotiate. Boop. Game. I mean, that's basically a whole turn of burn you lost, and you are a burn aggro deck. You cannot lose a whole turn of burn.
Yeah, Negotiate is one of those cards that really shines in this matchup. It's a card that is kind of like hit or miss. It doesn't do so well if your opponent has a lot of dice, but if your opponent's activating Vader, who only rolls 2, 3, if you're lucky, 4 dice, losing half of those right away to Negotiate is brutal. It is absolutely one of the biggest swing effects that the Rey deck can bring on you. Yeah. The Han Rey deck.
Yep, and it's one of the reasons why you want to have the battlefield so badly against this deck, because if you have the battlefield, they can't do this. You roll Vader, they have to have a die available to activate this effect. And so that becomes incredibly frustrating for your opponent if you're always having the battlefield.
Yeah, and so try and get that battlefield every turn, because not only do you benefit from just going first and forcing your opponent to answer your dice, but you deny this play a little bit more.
Yeah, and if you do end up having to go first against the Han Rey deck, roll that Tusken Raider. Don't roll Vader into the Negotiate. Just don't do it. You're gonna feel terrible when it happens. And think about it this way: they have it. You know why they have it? Because you haven't given them an opportunity to play it. So of course they still have it. Unless you see them discard it, they have it still.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in a game with 30 cards, you have to assume that your opponent is probably drawn into any single card, unless you've seen it discarded, or you like run it through your head and you maybe figure out maybe they are running a different card instead of maybe that card instead. Yeah. So like counting cards is maybe going to be a big deal in this game.
Yeah, I know it's going to be. It's super hard because on Tabletop Simulator, you just mouse over their deck and they're like, they have 18 cards left. Okay, cool. It's going to be really frustrating over the board. I have to train myself to count every card they play and really keep a better handle on that.
Yeah.
Another card that you might not actually expect to come out of the Han Rey that you have to expect always is Riposte, which says remove any number of shields from one of your characters, then deal damage to a character equal to the number of shields you just removed, and it is 0 cost. So, let's say your Vader has 3 damage left to go on it, right? Han has 0 shields, no dice left. Vader might die.
Yep. It's very much a card that I have fallen in love with in my Han Rey deck because it has flexibility and burst damage potential in that deck to just finish off characters, because with a lot of your dice being like 1/3 chance damage or having more blanks than usual with like the DL44, you sometimes just fall just a tiny bit short of killing a character, and Riposte just gets you there. With like all these extra shields you're generating that your opponent's not focusing Han because he's got 3 shields and he's going to get more anyway. They're going to focus Rey 9 times out of 10. You just sit there on 3 shields and then you punish them for it with Riposte.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is he can be shieldless because cards have ambush that are giving you shields, and they just play stuff like, you know, whatever they want with ambush. It doesn't matter what it is. There's so many cards with ambush. They play 3 ambush cards, which is giving them action, 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 action. Riposte, boop, the guy's dead with 3 damage left. That is the most annoying thing to always have to be on the lookout for, is your guys are never safe. You need to keep Vader and the Raider at around like 5 health available, because they can be bursted down at any point by the Han Rey deck.
Yep. Another thing that's important to know about Riposte is the fact that they don't need dice to use it. If they go into the next turn and you roll your Tusken Raider first and Han has shields and your Tusken Raider only has 3 damage, he's just like, pop, Riposte. 3 damage, no dice necessary. First action.
Yeah.
So that's another thing you should always keep in mind in general.
Yep. Another card that's really interesting that I think most people don't really think of is Awakening. And it's something you got to be careful of. It's not that your opponent is definitely running Awakening, and a lot of Han Rey decks I don't think run it, but I think of it as a burn card. So like, you roll a bunch of pluses with your jetpacks, you get kind of screwed, you get in this rough spot. For 1 cost, you basically get to do 3 damage. That's really strong, I feel like. And for those of you who don't know Awakening, it's in the starter set. 1 cost, action, exhaust the support to resolve one of your dice showing a modified side. This is a side with a plus, as if it was not modified. This can be incredibly powerful, and I really feel like this card is still very undervalued and overlooked by most people.
I think it's definitely undervalued. I think the main reason I've cut it in the Han Rey deck is because I think the main reason you want Awakening is if you're worried about Rey's consistency, mostly. Han does have two guns flat on each of his dice, and most of your upgrades will bring in extra range damage that can help with the modified jetpack. And for me, I sort of like did this analysis of, well, Han's also got 2 resources, so Rey's +1 resources isn't that bad. So the main reason I'd include Awakening is for Rey's +2 melee not pairing with her 1 melee very consistently. And that's a fair point to make, because you're going to roll that +2 melee a number of times, and with Awakening, you can just treat that as 2 damage, which is a valuable boon. Yeah. So it's just about preference, whether or not you feel like you want this sometimes do 2 damage, or if you want to just say, I would rather just re-roll the Rey die, or just not use the Rey die that turn.
And I think from the perspective of the opponent, my point is more that you really do have to be aware that it exists, right? If you just pull away Han's regular die, leaving a +2 and a +3, you can't be like, boom, take that. There is literally no way you can resolve those dice. That's not entirely true.
Yeah. Yeah, it is definitely an option available in the pool, and I would definitely not rule it off the table that Awakening could hit the board whenever they have that resource.
Yeah. Another really problematic spot that the Vader Raider deck can get into against Han Rey is you want your aggro, you resolve your dice quickly, you take the battlefield, you leave them with some pretty bad dice, they can reroll, but they also could have used the Force. It only costs 1, you just have to spot Rey, and then they turn their die to any side. And I found the times when you don't get wrecked by Han are when something weird happens, right? Like Han will roll a blank and a resource, and then the jetpacks are +2 and +3, and you're like, oh man, I barely eked out of that one. I'm gonna claim the battlefield and move on my way. And then they play Use the Force, turn Han to a 2, and wreck your face.
Yeah, I had a game, I believe yesterday morning, or maybe it was 2 days ago, where I was playing against a Crime Lord deck. And Crime Lord, he spent his entire turn, he had 5 resources, he rolled Jabba, then he took the battlefield, it was the Emperor's Throne Room, to resolve the Crime Lord and put the hit on Han. Because Jabba was almost dead. I would have probably killed him that turn. And Jango was still at full health. I had like my complete upgrade suite, and he took the battlefield. And I'm like, all right, I'll roll my characters. I rolled decently well, and then I spotted a win because I had 2 Use the Force in my hand. And so I just turned 2 of my non-dice to 3 range damage, and then I ended up doing like 14 range damage, killing Jango and Jabba. And Han, and we win the game right there because he took the battlefield that early. So it's definitely something to be wary of. And that's just another reason I kind of like the Frozen Waste battlefield, is because you can kind of mitigate that a bit just by removing one of Han's dice with that. It's another benefit to that battlefield in particular.
That's so brutal, too. Because Crime Lord, by the way, doesn't take effect until at the end of the turn. So if they can kill your guys during the turn, then sure, Crime Lord will kill that guy eventually, but Han kills you because Han shoots first.
Yep, it was very much a Han shoots and kills both Jango and Jabba first. It was definitely an explosive wow.
Yeah.
But it's really cool. It was fun.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those you guys will both remember that moment, and you'll remember it differently.
Yeah. I don't think he might not have had as fun. But
the last card I want to talk about as possibly happening, and I'm not sure that Han Raid decks are even running this, is Hyperspace Jump. Hyperspace Jump is just a card that you need to be aware of, that for 3, they can just suddenly end the action phase and get back that darn Starship Graveyard. So, like, if you end up setting up your dice and setting up your dice and setting up your dice, and you see they're sitting on 3 and they're not playing that second chance, you know, maybe be a little nervous about this. Maybe resolve some of your dice so you don't get wrecked by a sudden Hyperspace Jump.
Yeah, I definitely think one of the better things you can do against any sort of blue deck in general is not roll all your dice at once and sit on them. You need to spend your dice. Mind Trick is still a thing. I think I haven't run it very much recently, but I mean, it's still a card. People are going to play it. So don't have big, fat dice pools where your opponent forces you to cut them in half. Yeah. So
and
spend your
Daring
dice
Escape
regularly.
fits into that as well. I think Daring Escape is a terrible card, but it's got Ambush on it. It fits well with Han. It costs 2, but you get to re-roll as many of your opponent's dice as you want, and if they're sitting at a bunch, they're going to have some blanks, and they go away.
Yeah. What's even better, Hyperspace Jump is a card that I am considering trying to find room for, considering the new Infamous card requires less ambush in your deck in general, but we'll get to that. Hyperspace Jump just gets you that battlefield, as well as can potentially just give you the biggest tempo turn of the game and make your opponent basically lose an entire turn.
Yeah, and if they have, like, if you can pull off the Magical Christmas Land play, which is like DL 44 into Holdout Blaster, into DL of 44, get 3 extra actions. So you like roll Han, resolve Han.
That's 4 extra actions, actually, right there.
Okay,
if you do,
fine.
Yeah,
then you take the battlefield, which lets you, play an upgrade, and you still get another action, and then you can play second chance. You can do all kinds of just crazy things with it.
Yeah, and that is sort of the Christmas Land thing, and this deck has the potential to do that. And you know what's better after you just discarded all your ambush upgrades to cycle them into big actions? Hyperspace Jump, take the battlefield. I guess I will. I'll get these upgrades back now.
Yeah, it can be pretty crazy to be able to use it. I don't think too many people are doing it, but with Han having 2 resource sides and Rey having 2 resource sides, there's a real chance that you could make the crazy Hyperspace Jump play work. And you're overwriting these upgrades, so it's not like you need 2 for the Holdout Blaster, 3 for the DL44. You're really only needing like 1 resource to make all this happen, and then the 3 extra for Hyperspace Jump.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. I found that in the past, think it was just a cost issue, or rather, it was just I never really wanted to hyperspace jump at that point. But now that the deck is like my version of the deck is really reliant on that battlefield, or rather, it's so explosive with it, I'm reconsidering it.
Yeah, we'll have to see. So that's just a little bit of how you need to be thinking, and this you shouldn't just say like, okay, that's how the Han Rey deck works, but you need to be thinking about this with every deck. Like, what is it that my opponent's deck can do to me? What do I need to be aware of? How do I need to play my deck differently against this deck? Remember, you haven't built this beautiful machine that runs in a vacuum. You're playing against a person. You got to know how to play against that specific deck.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Travis, I don't know if you saw, I made a video this week where I ranked, or attempted, I should say, to rank all the legendaries. Obviously, it could be completely wrong as people get a hold of the game and more decks get made. But let's go ahead and name what we think our 5 best legendaries are. What are the 5 that we really want because we think they're really strong? I'll start with you for the first one. What's the legendary you want the most?
Oh god, the most I would literally kill for a 2-die Han.
Wow. You would kill a person for it? That terrifies me. I agree. That's on my list as well. I would not kill a person for this Han, but yeah, Han
I never said a person. I just said I would literally kill.
Oh, okay. Just
okay.
Animals. Okay, yeah. That's good, I guess.
I mean, womp rats. I mean, you used to bullseye them all the time, right?
I'm a little bit afraid because Travis, I'm holding up my Han. Does this mean I should fear you coming to my home and murdering me to take it?
No, I don't think.
Okay, good.
I think it would be the removal of your content from the community would not equate to a Han Solo.
Okay, that's fair. That's a fair statement. If you have 2 Vaders, I will come to your home and murder you for them.
I mean,
because
are you sure we
Vader...
can't just arrange, a prisoner transaction here? Vader for Han?
We could probably do that. But just so you know, I will ice my Han in carbonite, so you'll have to find a way to get him out before you can actually use him.
I mean, I just push the button on the side, right?
I'm not sure my technology is quite as advanced as that. Also, the card might be ruined. I don't know. But Vader's definitely the one for me. What I love about Vader is that he's so flexible. Like, we just talked about the Vader Raider aggro deck. Well, there's certainly a Vader control deck where you're taking advantage of the fact that you're knocking a card out of their hand every single turn. And if this game goes beyond a certain point, they automatically lose to Vader's ability, whether you roll any mill mechanics or not.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I love the pressure that Vader puts on my opponent. Even though I can't necessarily feel it myself, I can see it in that they're just down to 4 cards now, or 3 cards. Because, I happen to roll the Disruption. So my first move is activate Vader. I rolled the Disruption. They're down to 4 cards. Then they spend their 2 resources. They're down to 3 cards already.
Yep.
And funny. I didn't have to do anything but activate Vader.
As a Vader player, you're kind of like, that can't be that bad. Every time I go up against Vader, I'm like, son of a... You gotta be kidding me. I gotta dump a card? Like, yeah, there was 1 card in my hand I wasn't attached to. But guess what? That was my reroll card. Now what? I gotta discard a card I actually want to use this game for a reroll? Come on, man.
Yep, exactly.
One last thing with Vader. He says you may force an opponent to choose and discard a card. So you actually have to activate him every single time. You can't do a thing where you activate your Raider, they take an action, and then you go, oh, hey, did you discard a card? They're going to go, no, I didn't discard a card because you know what? You didn't tell me I had to because it's a may. That's a very interesting and different from something like Akbar that says your opponent has to take 2 damage. So be very aware of that. If you ever play in a tournament with Vader, you better be on your activation.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and I kind of like that it's a may, simply because it helps people remember, right? Because like the first time you get burned by forgetting Vader, and it really affects the outcome of the game. You're just gonna go screw it. I activate Vader, discard a card every time. It just becomes a mechanical rote in your mind.
Yep, exactly. All right, so what's your second card that you think is a absolutely top legendary?
Oh gosh, I guess I'll continue the trend of just picking 2 dice characters that are legendary, and we won't get them for months. But I'm gonna go with Poe because he's definitely my second deck building choice, as well as just a really awesome character from the new movie.
Yep, Poe is fantastic. What terrifies me about Poe is much like Han, he seems like a two-dice character. Like especially Poe, you want to build your whole deck around him. You want to have these ridiculous cards that you're probably not going to have the money for, but it don't matter. Because if you can discard a launch bay and discard 4 from their hand or hit them for 4 damage, it's going to be absolutely destructive.
And then every once in a while, you actually play the launch bay and discard their entire hand second action. And that happened once for me, and that was awesome. I loved it.
But Poe, yeah, I mean, Poe's great. 12 health, an amazing special, 3 sides with damage. He's awesome. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
All right, my next card, let's see. So you hit my top 3 already. The next one I'll say is One with the Force. And this is one that's not quite as flashy, but it's just so darn good. Because Rey is so cheap, she's going to be ubiquitous, she's going to be everywhere. Having One with the Force on her makes your opponent go, oh, man, maybe I don't want to kill Rey. Or they've committed to killing Rey, right? And then at that point, you pay 2 to overwrite, say, your holdout blaster with your One with the Force, pop it on her, roll it, use it. They've committed to killing her. They still got to kill her. You get it back. You get to use it again.
Yeah. One with the Force is one. It didn't make my list, but it's one of my 3 honorable mentions because it is one of those cards that, like, I think I and my opponents just groan when it hits the table because it's not going to stop them from killing Rey, but it's going to make it less of a favorable trade for them.
Yes.
And because you're going to get this really awesome upgrade for the rest of the game.
And I think a lot of people underrate it because of its 4 cost. I think you just really have to get in your mind that 4 cost upgrades do not cost 4. They just don't.
Yep.
What they cost is, they're like a layaway program, right? You play an upgrade, you get usage out of it, then you get rid of it, and that's when you get your One with the Force for a discounted price as you overwrite something else.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times in my Han Rey deck where I played like a holdout blaster turn 1 to get a really fast turn.
Yep.
And then the first thing next to is play One with the Force and then roll Rey again, and then now I've got that 3 focus side to just set Han to whatever I want.
There's nothing worse than playing against a Han Rey deck and seeing One with the Force with 3 focus. It's just, there's nothing worse because that is so much damage if they have a jetpack on that Han. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, you can basically just count every single yellow die as 3 range damage when they resolve that, and you have to have an answer to it, something that makes them all reroll, or you have to remove a bunch of dice at once somehow. It's really hard to deal with. It makes it super consistent.
That's the hard part. It's not that tough to deal with 1 die. It's nearly impossible to deal with 3.
Yep. And so then you make that choice. Like, if I can only deal with 1, I should remove the One with the Force die.
Yeah, that's brutal.
But then Han rerolls into a God roll anyways, and I'm out of options to remove it.
That happens to me all the time because you got to play the odds, and it's like, well, it's 100% if I let him do One with the Force. So I'm going to burn my 1 mitigation card, praying that they don't have a God roll, and then they always do, and that scenario comes up. Yeah. It's just the worst.
I think another interesting thing about One with the Force is it's one of the few cards without a blank side, so you can't use the Force it to a blank. You have to use the Force it to a less useful side.
Yep.
You can't isolation it because it's not a character die. Almost all of its values are, like, half of its values are 3, so the new Electroshock card, which is a 1-cost yellow event that removes a die of 2 or less, doesn't work.
You know what's the worst? Immobilize doesn't work on it.
Yeah, because it's got no blank. And I was just thugging it. So, like, all of these control effects don't necessarily work on One with the Force. You've got, like, flank and force throw, which is actually really good against it.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably at least a couple others that are, like, mildly good. But it's really hard to deal with this die.
It's a really tough die to deal with. And then the thing we didn't even talk about is Rey's whole thing is she loves to loop the holdout blaster. So you don't mind overriding the holdout blaster anyway. You're just going to get it back with a graveyard and play it again next turn. So you are actually often looking for cards to overwrite with, and this is just amazing to overwrite with.
Yeah, One with the Force is like a Rey card, I think. It's like very much like Force Strike is a Vader card, One with the Force is a Rey card.
In many ways.
For cycling upgrades and getting actions.
All right, what is your next legendary that you consider to be in your top 5?
All right, so we've already covered my top three, similar to yours. I'm guessing our top three were just the three two-die characters that are really good. I'm going to go with number 4 for me. I'm going to pick Phasma, Captain Phasma, because...
Why'd you pick Phasma? That was my last one.
Oh, I can go into Launch Bay
No,
instead.
I'm just messing with you. I agree.
That's cool.
Phasma's
But
awesome.
Phasma, we'll talk about Phasma. Phasma is a great one-die legendary, and that's why I like her. You don't need 2 dice. She's not flashy. She's just good. She just does consistent good stuff all around. Her die is pretty good, except for like a 1 range damage side. But all you need to make a good Phasma deck is some red cards, maybe some blue cards, and Phasma and 2 mooks. And
Yeah.
you can make a really solid deck out of that.
What I like about Phasma
anything
is she's like I love her in control decks. I don't like her in aggro decks, but I love her in control decks because in control decks you generally just need to live long enough and you're going to win. And she allows you to live a long time, right? So especially if you do something like Phasma and 2 non-uniques or Phasma Dooku and a non-unique, that non-unique is able to eat up some of the damage, and then maybe they feel like they have to commit to killing that guy now because he's ate some of the damage, which allows an 11 health Phasma to hang around forever, like an 18 health Dooku to hang around forever. It's very hard to kill everyone in a deck that runs Phasma, and spoiler, in Star Wars Destiny, you usually have to kill everybody.
Yeah, and Phasma is I think she's like the grinding deck. She is the deck that will just like force you to eat through tons of health and slowly whittle you down in the process. Like, yeah, she's not going to do a lot of damage, but she'll do 1 here, 2 there, sometimes maybe even 3. And then like by turn 20, you've taken like all of your HP and you're done, and she's still got like 3 HP on herself, and Dooku's got 4. And you're just like, where did this go wrong? I did so much damage, why aren't they dead?
Yeah, it's really hard for like a Vader Raider deck to beat because, as I talked about, the Vader Raider deck has a finite amount of burn, and that deck can pretty much eat it, right? It's like you roll one of your damage sides, and you're like, yes, I'm going to no mercy it next turn, and they're just like, either I'm going to control that die, or I'm going to eat it with my non-unique, and you can just never quite put together those bonkers plays because Phasma is just so annoying.
Yeah, and again, if you're running the blue version of that deck with blue and red cards, you have an absurd amount of dice removal. You've got the best defense, as well as all the blue die removals that you're going to upgrade Dooku with, and you're going to be removing dice with Guardian. It's really fun. If you are a control player, it will be right up your alley.
Yep.
If you hate control, you'll grow.
I feel like Phasma and Dooku are going to be the 2 primary control characters.
I can definitely agree with that.
All right, let's move on to my last one, which is Phasma.
Yeah, we just talked about her. If you forgot what we just said, you can rewind about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. So your last one is Launch Bay, is that correct?
My last one is Launch Bay because I'm not usually a big Timmy kind of person. I'm not so much into big cards, but because this card works so well with Poe, I was just blown away. It's so fun. You use this you roll Poe first action. You have 5 cards in hand. You roll the special. They can't deal with it. Just 4 range damage or 4 discard. Or if you're playing like a Crime Lord deck, I'll just do 4 disrupt and remove all that money you spent like a turn to get. It's really good, and if you get it on the board, it's a consistent threat every turn. It's one of the few cards that I feel is high cost and immediately makes itself worth the high cost.
Yeah, I feel like it looks like a Timmy card, and what we mean by that is it costs 5, so it's like a card that you look at and go, whoa, dude, this card is amazing, but you'll never be able to play it. But I think, like you said, because it fits so well into a Poe deck, it just becomes a really efficient meta card. It's not just a 5-cost card. And then the other deck that I think it fits really well into are mill decks. I have a mill deck that generates a lot of resources, and I wouldn't play this early. I don't need to kill guys. But in a mill deck like that, it becomes a really flexible card where you play it in the mid game, and you can either get the 5 discard side to just womp their hand immediately, or you kill one of their guys. Like, mill decks, you think about them not killing opponents necessarily, but if you can kill Grievous, who's being a real problem, and get half of his health in one swing, that can be well worth it and helps you get into the end game where you can mill them.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about this dice game is that a lot of cards have very few cards have like one solitary focus.
Yeah.
And this card is definitely like one of the most versatile in the game. So like whatever your win condition is, this card can help you achieve it, and it can help you achieve it big time.
Yeah.
So it's good to have options to kill characters and not just be all in on one exact strategy.
Yeah. There's a big pile of legendaries that cost between 3 and 5 that are all fine. They're all good cards. But I think Launch Bay is probably the one that has the highest upside among them.
Yeah, and don't forget the one that costs
Crime
6.
Lord. Maybe Crime Lord.
I think Crime Lord is pretty good.
Yeah. This guy, Travis is in love with Crime Lord, which we will soon find out. Don't worry.
Yeah. So I got a couple honorable mentions as well. We already talked about one with the Force, but I'd also like to throw in Jabba the Hutt and Luke Skywalker as good honorable mentions. Luke is good for all the same reasons Vader is good. I think you covered him pretty well in your video. I think 1 focus is a little worse than 2 disrupt, but otherwise their dice are identical. Mm-hmm. And Luke's ability, if you can make leverage out of it, like if you can make use out of cards from your hand, so like if the light side had No Mercy or a card like No Mercy, Luke suddenly looks a lot better. And then Jabba is just a fantastic cheap yellow character that gives you really, really good disruption. Having 2 discard and 2 disruption on 1 die as well as 2 focus to get what you want consistently is really underrated, I think. You look at him, you're like, he's got no damage, but trust me, play with him once and you'll see.
Yeah.
Jabba can do work.
I really do like Jabba, but I also want to say this. There was a reason why I said top 5. I don't know if you know this, Travis, there's only 16 legendaries. You know, if you start doing honorable mentions, pretty soon you're going to be naming every single one, you know?
Yeah, I feel like these ones were just legitimately torn in my soul between like...
Gotcha.
I felt really bad for cutting them, and I feel like I wanted to at least mention them so that people are like, but Jabba's so good. No one talks about Jabba. Yeah. Jabba's good. We get it.
I will say, I kind of disagree with you on Luke. I hope I'm wrong. Like, I want Luke to be awesome. First of all, my daughter loves Luke. Second of all, boom, I cracked Luke. I have a vested interest in Luke being amazing. But he just doesn't feel that good. He feels like he's really expensive, so he's basically Vader. So you would think like, okay, he's the light side equivalent of Vader. And in some ways he's better because he draws a card when you activate him, so he's going to have even more chances to play something like a bigger No Mercy or have more burn. The problem is the light side does not have the burn effects that the dark side has. So what you end up with is a Luke that just does less damage and doesn't have the burn card. So I don't quite understand where the great Luke deck is. I'm guessing in a set or 2, Luke will be amazing. But right now I feel like he's not that good. And it makes me sad, and I want to be wrong so bad. So if you find a deck, please message me and tell me how wrong I am.
Yeah, I'm not so sure Luke necessarily needs to be aggro to get use out of his ability. Yeah, if you're spending a lot of cards, then Luke benefits you more, and that tends to happen in the more aggressive decks. But I feel like there is a build out there for him. And I think what's really hurting him mostly right now is he's got 10 points left over, and there's not like a super great way to spend them after a 2-die Luke. Yeah. You can get like a 1-die Ray and then get that action looping, but then you're monocolor and you don't have much ways to really make use of extra options that you would get otherwise. So I think with more characters coming out, I think we'll find a really good like 2-die Luke with like a 10-point side character deck. Like maybe Chewie is 10 points, and then like Luke Chewie with like yellow cards becomes really good. We just don't know yet. But I think he's a strong card fundamentally. He's just not in the meta.
You heard it here first. Spoilers all around. Travis apparently has a secret document in which Chewie, Elite Chewie, no, probably not Elite, regular
Definitely
Chewie,
not Elite,
only costs 10, and he's going to be awesome with Luke. I would love to see that, actually.
It could happen. I know that Chewie's coming out because Lucas had talked about it, and he's probably going to be yellow. It just makes the most sense. So maybe, just as an example, but we might get other characters coming along too, like maybe Mon Mothma for red, or something like that. That just really helps support Luke's game plan. Yeah, and makes Luke an all-star.
I think for me the biggest problem is I don't think mono blue Luke works. So that takes Ray out of the picture, and like you said, that leaves you with some options that you might not be as happy with. I mean, you can do some stuff. You can do like a 1-die Akbar or a 1-die Padme, and that's fine. I just feel like there's better ways to do it. 20 is just so darn much. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, I think it's just that there's like Vader has Tusken Raider, which is a really solid 9. I don't think Luke has a solid 10 yet to fit into his last third. So we might see 1-die Luke. Maybe like 1-die Luke decks become a thing that really make use of that card draw. I could see like, actually no, I can't see 1-die Luke, 1-die Han. That's like not a great start. But like,
so bad.
I was like,
oh
my first thought was that like, what deck benefits from card draw? Han. Han plays so many events with ambush, but then no, it would quite well.
It's true,
but,
it does.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be something out there that will run like a 1-die Luke that'll get some leverage out of him.
All right, Travis. I want to ask you, are there any cards, or is there one card that you specifically think is going to be great, and it just we haven't really found the right deck for it? Not going to be decent, because most of the cards actually are decent, but is there a card that stands out where you're like, this is a money card, and we haven't really isolated this as an absolute money card yet, but may get there?
So I know yours, and you knew mine going into this. I'm going to say Crime Lord. Because it is such an interesting win condition that I feel is actually like worthwhile in pursuing. It's not like the more janky Magic style win conditions where like win if you have 40 life, where like it's actually quite difficult to do. I think Crime Lord is just like if you build your deck the right way, it's quite feasible to get this out there, and your opponent has to either kill you quickly or just start losing characters one after another, like turn after turn after turn.
Yeah, and here's another spoiler. Most decks can't afford to do that. If you're playing Vader Raider and they kill Vader on turn 3 with Crime Lord, you probably lost that game.
Yep, and it really does well against those elite deck builds that we see a lot of. We see a lot of decks with 2-die Han or 2-die Poe that like, or 2-die Vader, as you just mentioned, that really rely on that star character to sort of tie together the damage and close the game. And you know, if you get going in a Crime Lord deck, I've had it out as early as turn 1 and then been able to reach 5 on turn 2.
Yeah.
More often than not, it's actually like turn 3 when I can actually kill someone without like a lot of disruption from my opponent.
Right.
That just changes the entire game. The game's blown wide open. I've been doing this deck with Jabba 2 dice and Dooku 2 dice. It has a ton of control in it, lots of dice removal, lots of dice control to slow my opponent down while I build up the resources to just take out their characters one at a time. Yep. And it also has that side option. Dooku can do quite a bit of damage, especially with the focus from Jabba. The 2 Dooku dice can do 4 damage on their own, plus you got these force powers like Mind Probe that can do a lot of extra damage as well. So you do also have that option to deal with like the 4 non-unique deck or a 3-die or a 3-character mill deck where Dooku can kill one, and then you can use Crime Lord to deal with like the harder to kill characters like your Rays, your Hans, your Vaders.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Crime Lord is a card that once it's in the meta, it's not going out of the meta. And I think in many ways it'll end up being meta-defining. It'll be a situation where it's like, okay, like I feel like the Grievous deck is very meta-defining in that you need to have an answer. Like you can't just roll over and die on turn 3 to a lot of damage, or you lose. And I feel like Crime Lord is the reverse, right? You either can't let the game go so late that you let your opponent just build up and play the Crime Lord and kill you, and you also, if you see that your opponent is just going hardcore for resources, you need an answer for that. And right now, that's not really the case in the meta. People are just kind of like, whatever, he's getting lots of resources. I'm going to put out some awesome stuff. My opponent's going to put out some awesome stuff. But once Crime Lord takes a really cemented place in the metagame, I think that's going to have to change. And so, like, when you roll that Vader to disrupt side, it's not just going to be like, ha ha ha, I bluffed you. Woo! Roll it for damage. You're actually going to have to worry, like, oh boy, do I have to save this on the table so that they can't just go turn to Crime Lord, all your guys are dead?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It'll become, if it ever becomes a deck that wins a regional or is even a possibility in a major tournament, that you might include more disrupt dice in your deck, and you might not view disruption as like a second blank or a very situational non-blank, and it becomes you need those against a Crime Lord deck.
Yes. The
But
nice thing is you
another
can
thing,
usually pick
okay.
out a Crime Lord deck pretty easily. Like your deck, if I see somebody running Dooku Jabba, I'm like, I immediately stop and think, how does this guy kill me? Okay, he
Yeah,
does not. Like, he literally cannot kill me. What is in that deck that can kill me? It's the same thing if you see, like, Elite Akbar, Elite Padme. Eh? Okay, there's nothing to kill me. They are milling me, plain and simple.
yeah, it's not very subtle in hiding the fact that it's a Crime Lord deck. It does have some options to kill on the side because you might need a second out to finish the game in case
Sure.
Jabba dies, and then well, crap, now I've just got Dooku and he
Right.
can't do any damage. So you need that option. Another interesting thing about Crime Lord as well is it's also one of those supports or one of those upgrades with no blank side, so you can't immobilize it,
Yep.
and no matter what you roll, you're getting something out of it. So it's just a really formidable upgrade in addition to that game closing special side.
Yeah, I feel like it's Mind Probe only amped up even more. Like when an opponent rolls the special on Mind Probe, you're like, oh, you're kidding me. I better have
Yeah.
a way to deal with this. And this is even worse. Even if they don't have resources yet, you have to watch that turn so carefully and be like, oh, please don't roll resources. Please don't have some way to get resources. Don't play like two enrages out of nowhere on your Dooku to get resources to be able to Crime Lord me. It just feels like it changes the game. I personally, Travis, hope that this does not become a dominant archetype because I feel like it kind of breaks the rules of the game. I love cards that break the rules of the game and are tier 2. And what I mean by that is they're not the absolute elite, most efficient, most effective, most consistent ways to win, but they exist and you got to be aware of them. But if it becomes the best deck, oh, I'm definitely nervous for that day.
I really hope it doesn't become the best deck for a couple of reasons. Similar to what you described, it's not like in the spirit of Destiny to kill each other with money. You
Yeah.
want to be fighting. These characters want to be fighting. They want to be doing damage. So I hope it's a viable deck. I wouldn't maybe say tier 2, but I hope we have a large, vibrant tier 1 where maybe this deck is also
Sure.
in there with these damage decks.
Yep.
I think it's a deck that's hard to pilot because it is a control deck. And I really hope it doesn't become a top deck because it requires 4 legendaries out of the gate, I think, because you really want your 2-die Jabba and you want your 2 Crime Lords. So that's 4 legendaries, and that makes it really hard to get into the competitive scene.
I would go
Because,
farther than that. Don't you want Force Choke in that deck?
Yeah, you would definitely want like Force Choke as well, ideally. But I think like those just like right out of the gate, you cannot even consider this deck. I think without 2-die Jabba,
Yeah.
2 Crime Lords to
Yep.
get just like as a foundation,
So that,
and then you add
that's
on
4.
Force Chokes and other stuff.
I will
So
say
you
though
need a lot
that
of stuff.
I don't think that's the only way you can play Crime Lord. I
Definitely not.
had another Crime Lord deck where I was running red cards. It was actually a rainbow deck, and the point was to be able to play all of the choke that I could and local garrison, so that my goal was not to Crime Lord them on 2 or 3 by just bursting. It was the reverse. It was to say, okay, what do you got? I took all of your money every turn for the first 3 turns. I'm playing things like Holocron to get some money. I'm playing other cards to get some money more slowly. And by turn 4, now I'm starting to ramp up big time, and you're still stuck with your original dice. And I think that's another way you can use Crime Lord. I think there's probably lots of decks that Crime Lord can go into.
Yeah, certainly my build is not the only build. Matter of fact, I've only just started tinkering with it, but this is the first build I thought of that went like, all right, this is how I think I make this work for now. I'm really curious to see what other decks come out with Crime Lord as well.
Yeah. I think it's the card that is the most ripe for experimentation, and it's going to be really interesting. Like, for instance, my quote Crime Lord deck was not a Crime Lord deck. It was a choke deck that had a single copy of Crime Lord. And I just happened to draw it, and I just happened to be in the perfect spot, and I was like, wait, I can just overwrite my Mind Probe right here, kill a guy turn 4, and then I already have a couple resources, and then I killed another guy turn 5, and that was the game. And the opponent is kind of like, what just happened? You didn't even do anything this game. You just choked me for a couple turns, and then Crime Lorded me? This was the least fun I've ever had playing this game.
Yeah, and my deck especially also runs a lot of actions and on cards, like on supports and upgrades in play. So I like to actually stall out until my opponent is out of things to do, either
Sure.
from removing their dice or they've just done. And then they either take the battlefield or they are basically just passing at that point. They're clearly like out of stuff to do. And at that point, that's when I'll get up to 5 resources and then like say use the force to turn my Crime Lord die to a special and resolve it then, or use a cunning or a focus at that point. Because
Sure.
Crime Lord doesn't take place till the end of the turn. Why do it as your first action? Why spend all those resources when you don't have to? Wait until your opponent's done, and then say, now I'll kill your character.
Yep.
So it's a really cool card. I think it's
agree.
definitely a little under the radar right now, but I think it's starting to pop up.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's move on to the other card that I think is also.
This is a good
I
one.
totally agree with you. By the way, Crime Lord is a really great candidate. I think another great candidate is Patience, and it's the same kind of thing, right? It's that alternative win condition. Most people have been playing just regular Destiny, right? I'm gonna kill you, you kill me. Crime Lord works around that, and Patience does as well. Patience is insane. Like, since the day I saw this, I was like, okay, if they release enough one-cost upgrades, this card might be broken. And they didn't for a long time. They didn't spoil very many. It'd be like one here, one there. The full spoiler list comes out, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that is a lot of one-cost upgrades. And I've patience people for 9, 10, 11, 12 between turns 2 and 3. It's ridiculous. Like, when this card works, it is really ridiculous.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It has blown my mind how many times in my own mill deck experimentations or against a friend's mill deck, because he loves mill decks in every game. He always plays them, and he's really excited that it actually kind of works in Destiny, where like you just patience on turn 2 or 3 after playing like 3 or 4 one die, one cost cards.
Yeah.
And there goes half your remaining deck, because it's turn 2. You have 20 cards left in your deck, and I just milled 10 of them. And then on turn 3, there goes the other 10.
Patience costs 1. It says remove any number of your dice. Then discard that many from the top of an opponent's deck equal to the number of dice you removed, and it's blue. It doesn't say spot a blue, by the way. You just have to have a blue character. So you have a Padawan, your Padawan dies, that's fine. They brought Patience into your deck. It's absolutely brutal.
Yeah, I do kind of wish it was spotted blue, just so you have that check, because right now I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried there's not enough counterplay to it, because once they have that dice, the only way you're going to remove dice is either by, since there's no mass die removal, as in take the dice off your character, take out of your pool and put them back. It's pretty much one at a time. I think if it was spot a blue character, there would be a little bit more counterplay, other than just I have to kill your characters to remove dice permanently.
Yeah. A card that I really don't like is Jedi Mind Trick, and if Patience decks become wildly popular, I could see Mind Trick becoming just a staple that deals with Patience, because it halves their deck pool, basically.
But then, but then my concern there would be that blue becomes like a must run in that sense, because you're either running Patience or you're running Mind Trick to counter Patience. So I really hope that the deck pans out in the competitive way to not be super like top tier, but it definitely is good. I will point out that it's great if you love mill decks. It's a fun time to just go like, and I'm gonna mill half your deck, and I just want a little bit more counterplay to it, and maybe leadership does something there.
Maybe
there's some counterplay otherwise too, like indirect, like you can scout their hand and discard it if they don't have a 0 cost card in there. You can probe if you happen to hit it with probe, that can do it. So there's
both
a couple
of those have happened to me, by the way. I got set up for a 9 card Patience on turn 2. They probed me, pulled it out of hand. That was really brutal. I didn't end up getting to play it till near the end. And in another game, it was really funny. A guy played Scout on me, and so I purposely kind of messed with him, like, put out a card, put out another card, put out another card, put out Patience. 1 card left in hand that was a 0 cost. Don't be cocky. And like hung it there for a second and then dropped the 0, and he was like, no, I thought I had it.
Yeah.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah, so there's definitely some ways to play around it. I just don't think that, I think that it makes you run cards that will be better against Patience if this deck becomes too ubiquitous in the meta.
Yeah.
So
Another really interesting problem with the card is, let's say you're not that worried about mill. You're a pretty aggressive deck. Like, you're going to kill them before they mill you. They may mill off all your burn cards. Like, if you're the Vader
Yep.
Raider deck and they hit 2/2 Mercies and a Force Strike, I mean, your win condition is really neutered. It becomes very difficult to even do the damage to kill the 3 characters that you have to kill in most Patience decks.
Yeah, even worse. Take it back to the deck we just talked about, Crime Lord. If
Yeah.
I don't see a Crime Lord on turn 1 or 2, and then you Patience half my deck, and oh, there goes both my Crime Lords.
Yep.
What do I do unless I'm running Starship Battlefield? Like,
Yeah.
that's it. That's pretty much the game at
And,
that point.
Here's a spoiler: if you're running Patience, you ain't running Starship Graveyard, so your opponent has to win initiative and pick their own battlefield.
Yeah, and then Starship Graveyard doesn't really have a lot of synergy in that deck outside of
Yep.
in case something happens to Crime Lord. So, at that point, I'd be taking that battlefield purely as a meta call. But there are some meta calls to it. I just don't like. I personally am not a fan of the design space of, well, you need to run this one card because it counters this specific deck, and then like 6 cards out of your 30-card deck end up being counter cards that aren't really good outside of those counters.
Yep,
You
I
can
totally agree with that.
use them to reroll in this game, which is cool, but I just don't like building a deck and I'm like, all right, I got to put in these auto includes. All right, now I've got 24 cards to actually build a deck.
Yeah, and,
It doesn't
and
gel with it.
like we keep saying, these aren't even cards that we think are bonkers yet. We are
Yeah.
both excited about them and think that they may become major cards. And what I've been really loving about this game, Travis, and I hope you agree with me, that there seems to be a lot of good decks. Right, there may only be 1 or 2 decks that are the best, but the other decks are going to be really close. Most games I've played, it's like there's 2 best decks, and then there's 2 other decks you can play if you don't mind losing to the best decks, but are still good. And then there's a pile of other decks that lose to all 4 of those good decks, but have a lot of fun against each other.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a bit of like a circle of arrows going around here. So it's like rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock in a way where like certain decks counter other decks. So I think it's in a pretty healthy spot. Like I just mentioned, Crime Lord would lose to Mill, but I think Crime Lord does really well against those 2-die big elite character decks.
Yeah.
And those 2-die big elite character decks do really well against like Mill, where like they can kill off the important characters very quickly. So like there's definitely a bit of a thing here. I'm just hoping that it's not too much on one side. It's very much a cautionary thing. We're not saying that it is or isn't. Yeah. We just hope that generally we just want a really diverse meta. I think that's something everyone agrees on. We want a lot of decks to be competitive, especially like decks that are interesting as well. Because like, I mean, who doesn't like to hear a story about like, did you hear that like this Mill deck won this regional? And you're like, no way.
Yep.
And that's a really cool story. But we just don't want it to be the only story. We don't want it to be Mill decks.
That is a really great point. Cool stories are only cool when they're rare, right? A cool story that you hear every 20 minutes is not a cool story anymore.
Yeah, and who knows? Again, we may be completely wrong with our own testing. We may be missing something really entirely crazy out of these sets. After all, like in Conquest, the Kith deck was very much like a core set deck, and no one realized it until like a year after the game came out, how bonkers that deck was.
All right, Travis, it's time for everyone's favorite part of the show, I think. The quiz!
That's the thing. All right, you want to go first or me?
I'm going to quiz you first. That's always...
All right.
I don't like being quizzed. I'm a professor. I do the quizzing. That's how this works.
I see it.
All right, I got a card for you, Travis.
All right.
Survival gear. Tell me about it.
Oh, geez, survival gear. Let's see. I know it is a red hero upgrade.
Ooh, that's wrong. It's yellow.
No, isn't it?
Yeah. No,
it's red. It's
I was testing
red.
your confidence.
I was about to say, man. Yeah, it's a card I looked at. I know it has no blank side. I remember that being a plus to it. I can't remember much of the sides to it. However, I think it's like a largely utility card. It has a melee side, I think. Yeah, it definitely had a melee side because I was like, man, that's weird for a red card to have a melee side.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna guess like it has like a resource guide, a shield side, a disrupt side, probably like a focus.
Yeah, that's pretty close. How much does it cost?
I don't think it has any special abilities. It costs 2. I think I mentioned that earlier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean,
I think
pretty
it costs
much
2. I think
dead on. It has 2 shield sides. It has a 1 and a 2, and it has a 1 resource and a +1 resource.
Oh, no disrupt or discard. Okay.
Nope.
So, yeah, so it's a purely support your side card.
Yep. If it had a discard, I feel like it would have a lot more utility because then you
It-
could run it in mill decks as well. Right now, I don't really know where it goes. Like it could be
yeah.
interesting in a Qui-Gon deck. It could be interesting in a deck that wants resources, but it costs 2 to generate them. I usually look at this card and go, it's a fine card that fits nowhere. That's generally been my evaluation.
Yeah, I think that's was my evaluation with it too. Like I remember looking at it and I remember like asking myself, where does this go? And it's really tough. If it had a discard, suddenly
Yep.
Commando Raid looks a lot better because right now the only cards that trigger Commando Raid are Akbar and Launch Bay.
I wouldn't
So
be surprised if at one point it did have that, and then in testing it was like, guys,
good.
with Commando Raid, we gotta really pull back on how many cards have discard.
Yeah, and then but presumably in future sets there's going to be more red cards with discard. So who knows? Maybe they just didn't want it in the core set environment and they wanted it with a bigger card pool. So like
Yeah.
maybe there's more counterplay to discard decks.
that's
But
fair.
who knows? But it's solid. I don't think it's like amazing though. It's not like the immobilize of the red cards for sure.
I'm getting ready, man. Psyching myself up for my
Alright.
quiz. I got aces.
All right,
man.
you ready for this? I got a cool card. This is actually one that I quite like. I want you to tell me about Black Market.
Black Market. Whew. Black Market costs 3. Is it hero only or is it neutral?
It is neutral.
Okay, so it's neutral. It's yellow. It is a support, and it's a really interesting support. It's got like a resource side, I think. I think it has maybe even a 2 focus side. It has an effect that says when you hit its special, it's like it's draw 2. I feel like it's a longer effect than that, not just draw 2, but I can't remember the second half of the effect. I think it has 2 specials. It's a weird card. Why don't we talk about before we talk about what we think of the card? So where am I
Alright.
wrong? Where am I right?
So you were pretty close. It does not have 2 specials. It only has 1, and it has a blank. The second half of the special you were missing, it's draw 2 cards, and then you may play an upgrade from your hand, reducing its cost by 1.
Right. Gotcha.
It also has, really interestingly, for a support card, a +2 modified range damage side, as well as 2 focus, 2 shields, and a resource.
There we go. This is a card where if it costs 2, I'll be like, dude, this card
If
is
it costs 2,
good.
it would be broken.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come out there and say if it costs 2, it would be broken.
Yeah.
At 3, it feels just right. It's really cool. I
Feels
want to
expensive.
play it half the time, but then I'm like, man, 3 resources is such a tempo hit, and this card is hard to make it up with. But you can see it, especially if you're running like cheaper upgrades. Like if you were doing like a red-yellow deck
Yeah.
with like promotion, like just being able to like draw 2 cards and play a promotion for free and draw a 3rd card, potentially very useful. We don't have a lot of things that key off of lots of cards in hand, but if we ever do, then like this would work with Don't Get Cocky, and then like maybe like extra other cards that would draw you cards, and you could definitely see a deck there.
Yep. I feel like it's almost like a seed card. Like there's going to be some way to use those 2 cards better. Like you said, if you were running a deck that has lots of 1-cost things, you could use this to reduce them. Well, you know what you could also do? You just not play a 3-cost support and just play your 1-cost cards for only 1 and play 3 of them instead of this card, which is what I generally do.
So
I don't know.
I think I mean that is a fair point. I think this definitely has almost 3 costs worth in its base die. I think the reason it costs 3 is because of the second part of its special, which is decreasing the cost by 1. So you make that back the second you roll 1 special. I think its die is very good. 2 focus, +2 range damage modified, 2 shields, and a token resource. It's not all bad.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, maybe this is crazy. Maybe resource generation gets a little high. Maybe you have like a really insane resource stack on the hero side that utilizes this and Launch Bay. Now I'm getting into jank territory, but like you could have like a drawing card deck with Launch Bay, and then you can just like Launch Bay snipe somebody for tons of damage.
You just got me interested. You just
Yeah.
got me interested in this card.
And supports are hard to remove. The only card we have that removes supports that I recall is a hero event that costs 1, and you have to remove like a bunch of damage dice to do it.
There's also ATST.
You could theoretically do it. Yeah, ATST does do it too. You're right.
But yeah, I mean, my problem with the card is it feels like a late game card. and I was trying to figure out like how does this help a late game, right? It doesn't give you tons of damage. Its special isn't like Crime Lord where you're just destroying them. It just feels like if it was an upgrade for 3, it'd be better because you could just reduce it, right? You get a value play like Holdout Blaster, then you reduce it. But having to play 3 for a support that doesn't really forward your win condition feels very expensive to me. I love the card. I love the die. I just don't see how it fits.
Yeah, supports I think are inherently weaker than upgrades because you can't reduce them, and because you have to spend an action to roll 1 die.
Yeah.
Like with an upgrade, you get to like combine rolling that upgrade die with your character, but with a support, you have to like slow yourself down. So if you have a lot of supports, you're going to play a much slower deck than a deck that doesn't. So, but I look at this card, and it makes me. It feels like a combo card to me. I feel like it's a combo piece that's not that just needs a combo, and I think in the right deck it can find a home that will make it a really fun card. And it seems good to me. I think it's a good card. I just don't think it quite has a home in any of the decks we've tested yet.
Yeah, I can go with that. I also feel like it's a card 2-3 sets down the line we're gonna look at it and go, dang.
Yeah,
Ooh.
I think if there's ever I think it just needs more things to deal with that draw 2 cards. Draw 2 cards right now doesn't mean a whole lot because you're going to draw those cards anyway. But if you have like a combo deck that genuinely just wants to have a bunch of cards in hand and then play like a 6-card combo in one turn,
yeah,
maybe this is the card for that. Or if you want to play like super expensive upgrades and you have a bunch of resource generation to get that going, maybe this works. Like vehicle decks could be a thing, and this could help out in a vehicle deck with helping you generate that money in those cards.
I could see that. Well,
I can see a card actually that is discard a number of cards from your hand and gain a resource for each one.
Sure.
Up to like 3 or something.
Let's go ahead and turn to our last segment then today, which is listener questions. We have several. I think we're just going to do 2 because we're running pretty long today. Darth Rob has a very interesting question. He says that we often talk about cards that are good and what decks they're going to fit into. But he's wondering, are there any cards you've isolated as cards that probably won't be going into any decks? And I'd like to add a caveat and say any decks in the base set, right? As more cards come out, evaluations change rapidly.
Yeah. I feel like there's a few. Let me pull up the list and see what I can pick out. I feel like there's definitely a few cards where I'm just like, this card just isn't here yet, but every card I feel will have a home eventually, hopefully.
Yeah, I will start with, I feel like they've done a really good job in making most of the cards playable and at least decent, which I really like. But there are several that when I look at that, I'm like, it's a little, this is not quite good enough. It's usually because the price is just too high for them.
Yeah, I think the most obvious and straight up answer that I think a lot of people are going to realize very quickly are block and dodge. They're both in the starter set.
Yeah.
They both cost 2, and they say remove either for block, it's remove all melee dice of your opponents, and dodge is remove all ranged dice. I've just never, if you rarely find a situation where that is worth the 2 resources, I think. Because most of the time you're resolving dice as you roll them a little bit to play around Mind Trick, or, not always are you just going to have like 6 ranged dice. Now that said, I was playing Han Rey against a controlling deck, and I focused all my dice to range damage, and he dodged away 4 of my dice, and I was like, well played to you, sir.
Yeah.
I did not see that coming. I forgot that card exists.
It's really frustrating when people do that, right? They play the card that's a, quote, bad card according to your own evaluation, and just totally wreck you with it. And you're just like,
I feel like I don't get annoyed. I feel like I get really happy. I'm just like, dude, I just got hoisted by my own petard. And I feel like I wish I could reach through my computer screen and shake his hand through Tabletop Simulator, but I can't quite do that. So I'm looking forward to maybe having that happen in the real games so that I can actually do that. Because, I don't know, I feel like sometimes it feels good to have your hubris get the best of you.
Yeah. I think a card I'm gonna say is actually a card I kind of like. Which is maybe Aim. Like, Aim is a fine card. It's neutral. It costs 1. Turn 1 of your dice to a side showing range damage. It's just really specific, right? Like, it's a way worse version of Use the Force. If you're using a deck that is all range damage, maybe then you want to do it. It just seems so specific. If it costs 0, I'd play it. If it had ambush, I'd play it in the Han deck. But it just feels like it's a really blah starter card that you're probably not going to end up playing much once you have the full set.
I do think we should probably add a stipulation to this question a bit and avoid neutral cards if possible, because I think the neutral cards in this game were deliberately designed to be weaker overall because they can go into any deck. I think they are meant to be worse versions of other cards, like you mentioned, AIM being a worse use the Force.
Yeah.
But it's a use the Force that you can use outside of a blue deck.
Right. And the funny thing is,
I think that's the purpose of it.
As I'm speaking, right, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, in like a Han deck where I want 4 copies of Use the Force, maybe it's worth it. Maybe in a Poe deck.
It has a
it's
home.
Worth it.
Yeah, it definitely does have a home. I think AIM is one of the few neutral cards. I think like AIM, Close Quarters Assault, Flank, maybe sometimes even like Take Cover.
Yeah. They're all reasonable it's just hard with a full suite of cards to figure out how we're going to put that in.
I'll say that like it's definitely weaker when compared 1-to-1 with other cards, but I think that's because it's neutral and because you can run it in addition to those cards and run it in a deck where you can't run those cards.
Agreed. We have one more question, or one more time for one more question. This is by Clinton. But Clinton says, do you think that the starter sets do a good job for introducing new players to Star Wars Destiny? If not, what modifications would you suggest? And for me, it's a tough question because I feel like the sets are balanced pretty well for somebody who knows how to play the game. For someone who does not know how to play the game and has no idea how to evaluate cards in Star Wars Destiny, I feel like the Rey deck has a big advantage because it's very easy to see BB-8 costs 1. I have several other cards that are cheap. I can get a lot of upgrades out quickly, have lots of dice, and steamroll poor Kylo.
Yeah, I think that, as you mentioned earlier, new player versus new player, the Rey deck has an advantage, not only just in character points, but I think like just in terms of like some of the cards. Like I think it's just a little more consistent than Kylo. Kylo wants to see a couple of very specific power cards to get going. Now, as far as BB-8 goes, I'm probably an outlier here, but I'm not the biggest fan of the BB-8 card. I think it's like all right, but I don't think it's like the most amazing card. But I've
come to that position. I didn't think I would. As the cards were spoiled and drips, he seemed great. Like in the starter set, he's quite good. He's quite good with a quarter of the cards spoiled. But now that they're all spoiled, it used to be like, okay, I'm going to build my deck. Here are 20 cards that automatically go in. And BB-8 hasn't made it in a deck in a while for me.
Yeah, I've definitely cut him a while ago. I think the only deck I still run him in is the mill deck that just tries to get as many 1 die for 1 resource cards in there as possible.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think in the starter environment though, BB-8 is a fantastic card. But on that same token, like Mind Probe is insane.
Yeah.
Get going. It's got a ton of disruption and tons of damage that it can deal out for that Kylo player. So I think as a starter experience, like let's just like break down the goods though. I think that the decks have a wide variety of like different like stylings to them. Like yeah, they both use blue characters, but then like they introduce you to yellow and red as well. There's they give you all the different kinds of dice or the different sides of the dice so that you can learn what all the different sides do. I think that the characters they chose are very good for new players to get in, simply because it's the newest movie. It's the movie most prominently on everyone's mind. You're going to see Rey and you're going to see Kylo, and they're going to be right next to each other on the store shelf, and you're going to be like, I'm going to play the Kylo deck because I lean more with the dark side. I like the darker characters, and that'll immediately get people into the game right away. And if there's a 5-point discretion between the decks, is that worth it? Maybe. I think it kind of is, because I think with what they've released so far, there's not many other ways I think I could make the points more balanced other than not having Finn.
People have talked about removing Rey's second die. I don't think so. I think her dice are so weak that Kylo just has good cards. You just have to kind of play to those good cards. I will say, though, again, I think that the first time you play two new players, the light side deck will usually win.
Yeah, I think the light side deck wins 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5 games with 2 new players. I will say that if you played the matchup a lot and you've learned the strength of the cards, the dark side deck is a real powerhouse.
Yeah, once I got experience with the game, and then just people would come on to the simulator and say, "Hey, looking for a game, haven't played before." I always pick dark side, and I always win. It's just, like it's still a good deck against somebody who's inexperienced.
Yeah, and I think like another I don't know if I'd call it a problem with the starter deck is like you don't know the value of the cards if it's your first game, and there are a ton of cards in the starter deck that I just think should once you know, are just best spent as rerolls.
Yeah,
block and dodge and take cover generally, unless take cover saves someone's bacon, in which case it's the best card ever. But there's this stuff that you can learn as you play. I think your first time you play, you get a taste of what Destiny's all about, and that's what it should do. And then as you play more, you start to learn what the cards do, what cards are good or bad, and then you'll start figuring it out really quick. So I think it's a really excellent starter pack, actually.
Yeah. Another thing I really like about it as a starter pack is it's 2 dice of a cheap character, so that if you open somebody good, like you open a Han Solo or a Vader, you can stick your 2 die card that you already have with the new card that you've opened. And I think that works really well for inserting the new packs you buy into your starter decks.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point as well. And not only do you get these cheap characters, but you get them at various point denominations. You can run a 1-die Kylo, a 1-die Rey, a 1-die Finn, or a Stormtrooper or a 2-die Kylo. You get basically you're able to slot a character from the starter deck into just about any other deck. So Rey is 9 points on 1 die, and then Stormtrooper's 7 points. So
all right,
you're able to use them everywhere. So I think it's a good setup to get the game going.
I think that's going to have to wrap it up this week. If you don't like long podcasts, my apologies.
We're sorry.
This is apparently a long podcast. So Travis, thanks so much for stopping by again. It was great having you, and hopefully you'll be back again soon.
Yeah, no problem. If you guys want to chat sometime, you can always find me on the Discord, Travis Fights Dragons, or on the Facebook group. My last name's McDaniel, for those who ever want to ask me questions or find a game. So hope you guys enjoy Destiny, and thank you, Tiny, for having me on the podcast again. Always a pleasure.
No problem. And if you want to find me on the internet, you can find me at Tiny Grimes Games on Twitter. You can find me on YouTube by looking up Tiny Grimes and Star Wars Destiny. I've got, 20 videos now, growing every day, having too much fun with that. And this podcast is the Smugglers Den, and you'll be able to find it on iTunes very soon. So we'll see you next time. Have fun, and we'll hopefully have a great time at your pre-release parties.
Take care, everyone.
All right.